Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another OSR Tabletop with myself, Richard D.M. Bloodworth. And this live stream is actually coming to you based on several different comments on my comment section. One was talking about Shadow Dark and, how would I convert a game world for use with Shadow Dark, and then the other was how do I convert game mechanics from one system to another. The question was that what specifically the commenter was asking how to convert an AD&D first edition adventure module to a game system like Shadow Dark. So both were related to Shadow Dark, and I wanted to get into both and to take care of them simultaneously and see how that works out. I'm just going to have to mute this for a second and be right back with you. Just putting in the food order for dinner. So anyway, so let me take the first one that came across my table, and that is converting AD&D module or basically any Dungeons and Dragons module over to for use with Shadow Dark. And it just so happens that I recently backed a Kickstarter and already had the PDF portion of it fulfilled, where it is a Shadow Dark conversion. So I will be talking about that a little bit later, and then I'm going to do a full-length video breaking that down, because I was kind of prepared for doing that, and some other things came up, including this live stream that I wanted to do first. So I just reached out to the author of that Kickstarter. Unfortunately, he won't be able to make it this evening. It was no notice whatsoever for this, but I do hope to have I do hope to have him on later on at some point. So so let's start dealing with the Shadow Dark question. And making it compatible with an AD&D adventure. Hey, how's it going, Michael? Good to have you here. I'm hoping that this time slot works for more people. I know, according to my algorithm, 5 p.m. Eastern time on a Sunday is when most of my subscribers are actually online, and so I was like, let me just keep on testing out these time slots that are suggested to me to provide you with the best opportunity to come in online. And I will be inviting people to this stream, so you can come in on backstage, and I am going to actually do that right now. And so anyone is welcome to join in, and there you have it. If you want to come in and talk about converting adventure modules, official adventure modules, into different game systems than what they were written for. So, so I think one of the biggest things about taking an adventure, a predetermined adventure for a different game system, and converting it into any other game system is that it's not so much like the hit die or the damage done or or the or the basic core mechanics of a game system, such as like the attributes where, virtually everybody uses the same 6 across the board, or whatever variety they use. Looking at Shadow Dark, I think there's 2 big stumbling blocks that I think you will run into a conversion problem. The first being that character classes, so PCs and NPCs by that same nature, have a maximum level of 10. All right. And so if I'm converting from one to another, and let's say I'll just grab here, I'll grab this, even though this is a low level adventure. So here I have the village of Hamlet, right? And some of the NPCs in here, and I'll just grab one really, really quick. So we have a 5th level cleric I'm looking at here. And this 5th level cleric has a +1 plate mail, a staff of striking, fairly decent, really decent scores here, like incredibly decent scores. So looking at this, I was like, wow, did they roll this? So a strength of an 18, a 9 intelligence, all right, that's fairly common or low. Wisdom 18, dexterity of 17, that it would be constitution of 16, and a charisma of 18. So some hell of a rolls that they made for this character, the lowest being a 9 and the rest being all above 15. That's crazy. But anyway, converting this character, and this is only a 5th level character, but a 5th level character for Shadow Dark is much further along to being, not just mid, but really starting to push into the higher level for it, first of all. So that's number 1 stumbling block. The other one is the magic items. The magic items that you're going to pick up in an adventure like this, and even though this is a starting out adventure, the number of magic items that the player characters are going to come into contact with this adventure are going to be much higher than what you would find in your typical Shadow Dark adventure or even campaign. And so you have that difference between the 2 systems. Finally, and probably most important, is the experience point gain difference between the 2 systems. Shadow Dark, you might typically get between 3 and 5 experience points per game session, per adventure, possibly. And then they can carouse. The player character can choose to do a carousal roll, and they have a chance of getting anywhere from 1, 2, 3, even possibly 4. I believe the maximum is 5, but they'd have to spend quite a bit to get that level thrown in there. And leveling up in Shadow Dark is much, much different. So it kind of exponentially grows from one level to the next. So to go from 1st to 2nd level, you only need 10 10 experience points. Then to go from 2nd to 3rd, you'll need 20, then 30, and so on and so forth. And again, if you're only getting between 3 and 5 experience points in Shadow Dark, to convert that over to an AD&D module is going to be, that's where it's going to be kind of complex, I think, in trying to make it make sense. You're certainly not going to utilize the same experience points that would normally be gained in an AD&D 1st edition adventure module than you would be as translated over into Shadow Dark. So let me get into a few other of these comments. I think most modules can easily be adjusted to any system as long as you have a full module. Might have to adjust some numbers, but loot should be fairly easy to convert Yeah, and yeah, loot might be, but um, Shadow Dark, for instance, does not have a. You don't get XP from loot. You get XP more so from doing various things, and it's still pretty much capped around at, like I said, between, typically in my experience, it's anywhere between 3 and 5 experience points earned per session. All right, and once they're, so to become a second level character, it would usually take about between 2 and probably 3 sessions to get there. And then to go up to the next level, it will probably take about, anywhere from 4 to 6. Like you'll just keep on doubling them up to go up there. And so you'd have to definitely change the conversion between experience points from AD&D to Shadow Dark. I think you'd also have to trim out quite a bit of the magic items, because there are far more magic items in an AD&D adventure, and I'm using AD&D because that was the example given to me, in the comments section. So AD&D adventures tended to have a lot of magic items tossed into them. I mean, these are adventures written by Gary Gygax, and he was kind of the Monty Hall of giving out magic items. So it was quite a bit of magic that you were gaining, but again, the experience points spread needed to become higher levels in AD&D was dramatically different than what you find in Shadow Dark. So that conversion doesn't necessarily, you'd have to do a lot of work. It can be done, absolutely, but you'd have to do a lot of work in modifying it. Now, I was initially saying in a previous video and in the comments, in that comment section as well, that I believe in, and this is actually going to Bo Paints, his comment, because he had asked me to clarify when I said that I think that there are game systems are written for certain world settings, or world settings are built around certain game systems, and they work best when used in, paired up, rather than trying to, take a system and move it and port it over into another. Now, if you're keeping it really simple and you're not using so much any mechanics that are attached to the world, then it's a little bit of an easier conversion, because you're only using the theme of a world setting and some of the lore of the world setting, without any of the mechanics that might be attached to the world setting to a different game system. I have used Greyhawk for Shadow Dark. I've also used and I've played plenty of modules, bought plenty of adventure booklets, third-party booklets that are set in the Hyborian Age. And Shadow Dark works well in the Hyborian Age, so playing in the world of Conan the Cimmerian. However, if I compare that experience to what you'd have if you were running Conan 2D20 from Modiphius, the Conan 2D20 is going to work far better, because the game system was built around the world setting, so to be fully compatible with the two. When I run Shadow Dark in the Hyborian Age, in order to kind of emulate that same kind of pulp action, I had to change, or really increase, the amount of fortune tokens that you get in Shadow Dark, in order to kind of pair up and match with the momentum system of Modiphius's 2D20 system. So I had to make it much more of an action-based and and bold, let's say bold action for Shadow Dark that you would normally not have in Shadow Dark. You don't normally have to be much, much more cautious in Shadow Dark. It doesn't have the similar features of Conan 2D20, where you can just mow through minion level creatures and basically, like reap the whirlwind through them and just slay 20 minion level guards, let's say, and then only face some kind of challenge against veterans or even higher level challenges. You don't have that kind of a mechanic in Shadow Dark to do that. You have to create something that comes close to doing that. So let me get to some of the other questions here. Yes, Erudite DM, hello. Good to have you here. Austin, thanks for your input so far. And let's see. Well, yeah, might be hard to run this dungeon in a Call of Cthulhu game, but the theme of the story mystery world is vastly different from any adventure. Yeah, I mean, you can port over themes, or even stories or lore a lot easier than game mechanics, and that's really what I'm talking about. However, there's sometimes, like I've had people say, "Oh, we could just use the 5e engine, all right, and port that over into other world settings, and and there might already be a TTRPG that's written for that world setting." And it's like, no, why would you use this? I've had people say, "Oh, well, just use, if I want to run a Fallout game, I'm going to have 5e mechanics in Fallout." Well, Fallout is a Modifius game. Use it there. Same thing goes with, people will say, "Well, I use Traveler, the Traveler game system for Star Trek." Now, if you're going to compare it to Modifius' Star Trek, all right, fine. You're probably better off doing that, because Modifius did not do a great job with Star Trek, at least the first edition of it. But it's usually best to use the game that is written for the world setting, or the world setting that was built around the game itself, and pair them up that way. And so I just have a feeling that, if I'm going to run Call of Cthulhu, I'm setting it in Arkham, at least to start off with. If I'm running AD&D First Edition, it is in Greyhawk. All right, I see no reason to take it into the Forgotten Realms or into into the world of Mystara, and that setting, because that's a D&D setting. And I'm certainly not going to take it into into the world of Aird, which is Castles and Crusades. AD&D First Edition belongs in Greyhawk. My opinion. That's just the way I pair them up, and I see no reason to spread them out that way, and to go and take a game system out of where it's supposed to be and put it into someplace else, when that someplace else has a game system that was written around its use. Now, sometimes you have game companies that have, or different game companies that have written for the same game worlds. I can go back to Iron Crown Entertainment doing Lord of the Rings, and then you have various other various other iterations of Lord of the Rings tabletop role-playing games that were written by other companies, yet it's still in the same setting. But they're, again, writing those game systems specifically for the use in that game world. All right, and so there should be a good mesh between game mechanics and game world. I mean, and TSR wrote Conan, Conan the RPG. I have it behind me over there, and it works really well. And there was a great use of the lore in there, and the game system, played. It was a D100 system, so it was closer aligned to like the Star Frontier system that they have there, or Gangbusters or whatnot. It was not so much an AD&D clone, and yet there was an Advanced Dungeons and Dragons Conan series of 2 modules as well. So they kind of did both, and in both cases, they had written those adventures very, very specifically for the setting that they were in. So that it kind of worked because they did everything they could to enjoin them together, both game system and world. Let's see. We also have 101 add-ons for most world settings. They tend to have to be universal. Sure, but I don't know if making, I'm not a big fan of the multiverse concept, where you can just mix and match these things and bring these things over. I am certainly not a fan of, hey, we can have, Marvel superheroes in Dungeons and Dragons kind of thing. It doesn't matter to me that, TSR had a Marvel superheroes game, and, they had the Conan the Barbarian game, and they had Dungeons and Dragons, obviously, and Star Frontiers. And so they could be part of one multiverse, and we can just mix and match them all that we like. Sure, you want to do that at your own table, it's fine, but I'm not going to, I'm not going to say that, hey, this is playing Dungeons and Dragons, let's say, the way that it was meant to be played. It's not a, I just don't agree with that kind of multiverse concept. I think in many ways it's almost lazy, in my opinion, to do that kind of thing, because basically what you're saying is that I can't create a new world, and so I'm just going to borrow from other systems and throw them into this multiverse concept, and now the players can take their characters and travel into all of these different worlds and stuff, like as if they were traveling through, the manual of the planes kind of thing. Those were very, very specific things as well that were aligned with the system that you were taking them to, if that makes any sense. Again, you are welcome to come into the channel and disagree, or say, hey, but consider this, and I really, really appreciate that. Hey, Peter, how's it going? So I'm glad you're here, because you are an adventure designer, and you have created using Savage Worlds, plus probably other systems as well, creating adventures. And so I'll put it to you as well. What prompted this, if you weren't here early on, was someone had asked me about converting AD&D first edition adventures to other game systems, particularly to Shadow Dark, and what would be some of the challenges revolved around there. And then I had another comment on my channel that was talking about, I had said that world settings are often kind of tied to a very specific game mechanic and game system, such as like AD&D first edition, and tied to Greyhawk. as opposed to taking AD&D First Edition and even carrying it over into the Forgotten Realms. I don't think that they mesh as much as Second Edition ties to the Forgotten Realms. So that's kind of the two different points I'm trying to bring out in this, in this live stream, and people are welcome to come in and give me your points of view. I'm open to those points of view, and we're going to move on. While settings tend to be strongly tied with their theme, it sounds like you're concerned about compatibility, reverse compatibility. Yeah, I mean, it's just if you have to change a game system to accommodate a setting, and there's already a game system written for that setting, then why change what you have to just use the game setting, the game system that's written for that setting? And the Conan setting is one that I'm, used as an example. I think it's a great example to use for that. Modiphius's Conan 2D20 is, in my opinion, the best game system that I have come across so far for being set in the Hyborian age, in Conan's Hyborian, era. And I mean, there was Mongoose before that. There was TSR before that as well. And there will be future game systems, going forward. And I will always compare them to the way that Modiphius captured that setting, both in theme and tone and just an overall presentation of that world setting that I wouldn't imagine using on a regular basis. Now, I'm not talking about running a one shot or something like that, because there were some, pretty great adventures, written in the Hyborian age for Shadowdark. I've written one myself. And so, but I had to strongly convert that, that Shadowdark game system to match up with the theme and tone of the Hyborian age. And so that's what I'm talking about, is the, it's not so much a concern. It's more of, why reinvent the wheel kind of thing. It's like there's probably a game system that's written specifically for it, and use that one, or try at least to use that one before you put in a lot of effort elsewhere. I generally avoid running games set in someone else's IP. I usually run in the setting of my own making. Yeah, and I've done the same as well, although for certain game systems, I'm kind of locked in to, I'll always run AD&D First Edition and Greyhawk. I just mental block or whatever. It's just like, I just always keep on gravitating back to that setting. I often don't run Castles and Crusades in the aired setting, because the aired setting, I just don't have that time to do all of the reading, because the aired setting for Castles and Crusades is just thousands upon thousands of entries and even pages of entries that you would have to read in order to get a really good idea of what the world of aired is. And to me, it's like I just place my Castles and Crusades campaigns, although my last one I was doing in the Iggsburg setting, Gary Gygax's Iggsburg, and I would continue doing that as well. But I try to just put that in a generic setting, and potentially my own setting as well. So yeah, it's a I'm not even saying that my approach to this is uniform and extremely consistent. Sometimes it depends on which one or that. It depends on how I'm feeling in using a system for a setting as well. So let's see. The challenge with conversions is bringing over the story and elements that evoke the feeling of the adventure while trying to make one for one translation of the rules. Yeah, and I think it's that's why I mean Greyhawk is the game setting, the world setting. Greyhawk is not overburdened with rules tied to it. So it's kind of a framework and it's very easy, very malleable. I think Forgotten Realms, which I am much less familiar with, just it strikes me as being so compact with so much lore, kind of shoehorned into it that it's hard to navigate yourself in between lore components and elements. Same thing with Aired for Castles and Crusades as well. Shadow Dark currently does not have, although soon it will have, a world setting. That's its current Kickstarter right now. And we'll see, but that's really built around, and I don't know the full flavor of the world setting. I've only seen a few of the of the early release components of it, so have not had the time to, or the means to read it through, in its entirety, to see how open world it actually is. But it's kind of being built on a hex crawl as well, so like a West Marches hex crawl kind of system. So I think that it will have a lot of breathing room in between elements within it. Yeah, I know. I keep on saying one of these days, I would love to get out there. It's just such a hassle, personally, to get out to Gary Con or any place out in the Midwest there. And right now, airfare is like ridiculous. So there's no chance of me getting out there while, airfare is as high as it currently is. But yeah, I do envy you guys. So sounds like you missed the memo. Originality is dead. Even your original setting is made up from books, videos, and other media you've absorbed or filtered. Yeah, it's hard to say. And I know you're kind of being tongue in cheek here as well. That I'm sure someone can create an original world that is that is, let's say, 75% original. It's impossible to separate everything that has never been, that has been done before out of your original idea. I don't think it's impossible. I think it's impossible to come out with something that has never been done before. Not within a hobby, that's for sure. Because many of us are using the same foundations, and so it's impossible to do that separation. Yeah, it certainly is. If I drove, it would be 15 hours one way. Um, if I fly, it's like between five and well, no, it's probably about 800 round trip, and then the place itself and everything. You start pushing, and with hotel stays and everything like that, it starts becoming like a $1,600 weekend. And to be honest with you, there's just no way that that's in the cards for me. So yeah, I am pretty much tied to local within 4 hour trip, maybe a 2 day stay kind of kind of convention setting. So I will definitely be there. Unfortunately, I won't be at Rising Phoenix in just a couple of weeks. I'm having a medical procedure that literally the Friday before that, and I don't want to risk that. So I will certainly be at Rising Phoenix next year. So Rising Phoenix 2026, I will be there. And I won't be at the next page. I won't be at page 3 next year because I'm doing Rising Phoenix instead. I'm going to have to kind of alternate some of my things. So yeah, and there are plenty of local things coming up in my area as well. I will be at Rogers. Hey, Roger, how's it going? Um, I will be at Rogers Central New York RPG, and I'll also be at AutoCon, which is in my hometown. Both of those are in June, and then I will be at ShireCon in September. So those are my next 3 conventions. I will certainly be there. I will be running at least one of the cons. I'm probably not going to be running very much, or maybe just one game session, because the rest of the time I want to play. And I might very much go with that kind of a thing with ShireCon this time around, and look just to play some games. And but at Rising Phoenix, I'm definitely, because there's big advantages to being a GM at Rising Phoenix. So I will be GMing at least 3 sessions at Rising Phoenix in 2026. Yeah, unfortunately, I just couldn't do it this time around, Peter. So I guess I'll catch you at maybe one of these other cons, or certainly at next year's. Oh, you will be at Shire, so I will see you at ShireCon. That's for sure. I think I'm only running one game at ShireCon, and then the rest of the time I'm going to be playing. So I'll try to catch your game there. Unless you're running that adventure that I've already been through, I don't want to take someone else's opportunity there. But if you're running something new, let me know, and I'll definitely look to sign up for that. Reminder: there is no healing old. No, it's just it is what it is, right? So it's like I said, it's my first time. I'll actually say it that I'm having a hernia operation, so I'm not quite sure what the recovery time for that is. So I'm gonna wait and see. Like I said, I didn't want to risk having to having had my game start to fill up at Rising Phoenix, and then turning around and saying, hey, I have to bow out now. If you're running Mothership, I am there in that game, guaranteed. I've been waiting to play that game. I've been waiting to run it too, but I'd like to play it first. But I am in that if you're running that. That's for darn sure. So let's get back to subject at hand, and that is converting adventures to different game systems, and then converting games to world settings. And my argument is that that there are some world settings that are written specifically for game mechanics that are with a game that's already out there, or vice versa, or they happen simultaneously as well. So you do have some that they both came out at the same time, and so you have them working hand in hand. And I don't believe that it is best situation for you as a game master to just artificially try to cram different things together. I am not a big fan of the multiverse kind of uh, theory and process of trying to connect things that are not typically connected. I think that um, they're best off being in their pairings as they were meant to be. Again, there's some that break that mold. Middle Earth has many different game systems that work perfectly well within it. You have other game systems like Peter is most familiar with. You have game systems like that Savage World that does not have a dedicated Savage Worlds world setting. It has multiple different world settings, and that's because the um, the game system of Savage Worlds is designed to be that flexible. All right, so let's see. FriendCon in Maine. I've never heard of that one. Yes, you can try. Yeah, and that's certainly possible. That's certainly possible. Although, how would you convert? So, how would you convert like Call of Cthulhu into and the setting? Let's try Eldritch Horror. How would you convert the theme of Eldritch Horror to D&D 5e, let's say? Now D&D 5e does not have, in my opinion, if the game system doesn't have a sanity mechanic, it's going to be hard to port over Eldritch Horror as a theme into it, without you having to create a sanity and insanity system for that particular gameplay. Very similar to, like I was saying, Shadow Dark does not have a true momentum system like Modiphius's Conan 2D20 system does. And without that momentum system, you're really not going to get that feel of a pulp sword and sorcery action feel to it. So yeah, good artist copy, great artist steal. Yeah, I'm not so much sure about that either, but I know it's a very common quote. I reduce the adventure to its important highlights as an outline, then rebuild it in a new system with the important elements. Yeah, and again, like I said earlier on, you can do it. It is absolutely an achievable thing. But you can already see that you're putting in the effort to make it happen. All right, and that's what I was talking about as far as yeah, all of this stuff can be done, but it takes effort. It takes work to do it. And if there's already a game system that does that for that particular setting, then why not just use that game system? Or if if I wanted to start running AD&D second edition, I would go out and I would get at least some of the materials for the Forgotten Realms, which is the one thing I don't have of my second edition collection. I have all the rule books or most of the rule books of second edition, but I don't have the world settings for it. And I could say the same thing for third edition and fourth edition. I don't have any of those world settings. So if I were going to run those rather than just have them for reference materials, then I would go out and I would get those world settings for them, and I would run them in those settings. So let's see. First, ask if you should convert it. If the mechanics of the system are load bearing, it might not be wise. Yeah, or it'll just be time consuming. and that's kind of where I'm laying into. You know, if you have to introduce a lot of new rules mechanics into the game system, then you're probably better off just using a different game system, one that's meant for that world setting. Yeah, yeah, and again, you know, yeah, some players don't like the idea of losing control of their character. That's why they don't like whether it be mind control. They don't like fear spells. I've seen they don't like. They certainly don't like insanity mechanics that will make their character go potentially permanently insane as well. But when we started playing Call of Cthulhu back in its earliest, editions, whether it be first or second edition back in the day, um, that was part of the allure of the game. We definitely knew that there was probably only there was only 3 or 4 outcomes in any adventure that you were running, and the first being that your characters died, your characters went insane, your characters your character permanently insane, I should say. Your characters were so shocked and stunned by what they see that they tried to flee, and then your characters just fled before they really did engage in anything and managed to. There was no winning in Call of Cthulhu. There was only, did you survive, and what condition of survival do you consider that survival? Kind of thing. It was like, that was the only win. Was did I survive and I'm just shaken? Did I survive and I'm in a padded cell, or or did my character die? Kind of scenarios there. Uh, thanks a lot there. Thanks a lot there, Mercurius. My ear trumpet has been struck by lightning. And Roger, you are the recipient of that. So congratulations. And I'll be doing some free giveaways too. I don't believe I've done any of my April yet. So I will start off with my April yet. I also have a live stream that's coming up on Wednesday where I'm going to have a game designer on the channel. The game designer, David of Ironbound RPG, will be on my channel on Wednesday. So I might save them actually for that as well, since this seems to be just me solo. So I'd rather do giveaways when I have a guest on the channel. I'm definitely looking forward to having him on the channel and checking out his game system. His game system, I believe, is built on Power of the Apocalypse, which I have very little experience with. So it's going to be a great learning opportunity for me, and and a great introduction possibly for his games to all of you that follow the channel. Back in my day, we went through 15 characters before level 5. Yeah, I mean, I didn't go through that many, but we had quite a few characters die in a number of different game systems that we played. As we got more mature and a little bit more cautious, that kind of toned down a little bit, although there were certain adventures that my dungeon masters said, you don't want to use your primary characters for this. Like Tomb of Horrors was the first one like that. We did not run our primary characters through Ravenloft the first time that we were playing or going through that as well. Although we actually defeated Ravenloft, we completed that. We used a combination of characters through all of the, against the giants, and then later on through the Vault of the Drow, and then, into the Demon Queen of the Web Pits, adventures. So we use a combination of our primary characters and some secondary backup characters. I mean, Tomb of Horrors, we had a total party wipe the first time we went through it, and then um, 3 out of 5 fled the second time we went through, and those were our primary characters going through. And I was like, no, I'm not losing character in here, not that character in there. So yeah, we went through a lot of characters back in the day as well. I know I went through quite a few characters in Twilight 2000, first edition, and even a couple characters. I lost at least one character in Villains and Vigilantes, second edition. I lost a couple of characters in Call of Cthulhu. One from Total Insanity, and 2 were killed. I never lost a character in Toon. That's just a joke. I love that game, Toon. That was an awesome game back then. But yeah, your characters didn't die in Toon. Let's see, what else did we? James Bond never lost a character in James Bond. Hero Points certainly made that possible, and I did lose characters in Star Frontiers, and although not many, by then it was, and that's a fairly forgiving system as well. By then it was much better, prepared as a player, for things like that. Yeah, and CNC is an even more challenging system, especially if you're using like critical hits and those kinds of things, than AD&D First Edition was. So yeah, that'll be a brutal adventure to utilize with them. Any of the, and we'll get back to the thing. So if you're taking any of those AD&D modules, or even the Dungeons and Dragons modules, and converting them over to other systems, like I said, with Shadow Dark, you have the experience point differential, experience points gain differential between 2 systems. With Castles and Crusades, which is very, very similar in experience points, you're not going to have it there. What you're going to have in Castles and Crusades, I think, is the challenge of the critical hits system. And if you're using the monsters from Castles and Crusades rather than those in the AD&D, the monsters are more challenging in Castles and Crusades, in my opinion, than in AD&D. So a vampire in Castles and Crusades is going to be much more powerful than compared to a vampire in AD&D, although they don't have the same level draining. So that maybe that's the one big difference between the two. But if you're taking a demi-leash from Tomb of Horrors and you're converting it to Castles and Crusades, I think that it's going to be much more dangerous in Castles and Crusades. Again, my opinion, but I think that conversion would be a very interesting conversion. If you look at some of those, especially if it's a mythological beast, because if you use the mythos in Castles and Crusades, those creatures are off the hook dangerous in Castles and Crusades, whereas they're not as dangerous in AD&D. So like if you take a Medusa in Castles and Crusades versus a Medusa in AD&D, night and day. They're so much more dangerous in Castles and Crusades because they just take the mythological creatures from the real world and they just amp them up like crazy in that. So a lot of fun to use them, but they are all of them are like the boss monster that the player characters will probably end up facing. So again, I mean, this was kind of like a two-pronged thing, discussion to be having here. So converting game system to game system, and then converting world setting to game system or vice versa. And I think that they're both handled a little bit differently in that game system to game system. I think you'll have more challenges, and world system to a game system, a world setting, I should say, to a game system. If you're just taking the themes and tone of a world setting and not any mechanics actually attached to it, then I think it's very easily convertible over to it. If you have very, very similar game systems in tone and in design and such, then they're fully compatible. And if Peter is still here, like I would say, if he's familiar at all with Aliens RPG, and then comparing that to Mothership, which really Mothership is built on the theme of Aliens RPG, or built on the theme of Aliens, the movie series, then I think if you were kind of mixing those two up, I think that they're so similar in theme that that they could work together. Although you're probably just better off choosing one or the other and just running that instead of trying to mesh them together. I've often been wondering, like Star Trek, if I wanted to run Star Trek, and instead of using the Modiphius one, I don't know how the second edition of it works, but I found the first edition to be very wanting. And I think it was too pigeonholed. Like you had to play, at least initially, you had to play a Starfleet officer. There was no supplemental for playing Klingons even at that time. And so I've been thinking about and looking for a game system to run in the Star Trek universe kind of thing, and wondering which would be the best system. I could go all the way back to FASA and running that system fine, but if I wanted something that is a little bit more modern and familiar with it, then what system would be the best system to put in that setting? I know a lot of people are going to probably say Traveler, and run Traveler, set Traveler in the Star Trek setting. But yeah, that's kind of where I lean on that. So let's see. So I got that one already. The stress is a big driver in Mothership. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that it is in Alien RPG, which I don't have yet. I mean, eventually I'll get around to getting it. I'm assuming it's the same thing. I'm assuming that just the stress and suspense is a major driver, and it's hard when you're dealing with, like, how do you really instill fear in the players? And I think the only way that you really instill fear in players, it's why horror RPGs are so hard to pull off, is that you have to have them just really expecting that their characters could die at any given moment, and that's how you get them on the edge of their seat. Is that any turn around the corner could be your last, kind of situation. Yeah, running Aliens in tune would be weird. It'd probably be hella fun though. But yes, it would definitely be a very strange, strange kind of thing. It would be almost like, because characters really can't die in tune, but you might have them like on a timeout kind of thing. And in order to create stress, you'd probably have to have some kind of a real world timer set up where they have to reach some kind of an achievement before in order to be successful within a given amount of real world time. And if their player characters get killed, they have to sit out for 5 minutes and do something along those lines. And that way, you're creating the suspense of like Aliens, and still tying it to cartoon characters from Toon. That's how I would probably create some, some sense of, suspense and fear, because no one likes to lose the task, lose the quest. So let's see. I'm also checking other comments to see if anything else comes in. And the alien acid could be like the acid from Who Framed Roger Rabbit. I haven't seen that movie in so long. The Dip. Yeah, I haven't seen that movie in so long. I don't remember the scene. Now I'll have to end up looking it up. But yeah, I'll look into that. Yes, The Dip. Oh, I'm going to have to look it up now. Let's see. So let's see. Who framed Roger up? Who Framed Roger Rabbit? Dip. You probably hear it right now. I'm waiting for the actual dip. So I'm looking for the actual scene. All right, let's see. Oh, here we go. All right. Let's see. Finally got to the holding shoe. Let's see.
That's one day, sure. Hey, boss.
They're not kid gloves, Mr. Valiant. But this is how we handle things down in Toontown. I'd think you of all people would appreciate that.
Okay, that took a little while to get to, but hopefully you saw it. It just dissolved. Hey, Bo, I was welcome, and I certainly did bring up your question, which was related to making a game system tied to a world setting or vice versa, kind of thing. So yeah, so I'm glad that you've finally made it. It was called the dip. Yes, it was all industrial solvents, acetone as the main ingredient. Yep. Maybe a spot of methyl ethanol, ketone. Yep, all of that. So yeah, I mean, so that's how you can add some horror to a game like Toon, and combine up themes along those lines. Let's have something that can take out a cartoon character when normally not. I only chest burst when it's funny. Yeah. So anyway, well, thanks for that one. I was not, that was something I haven't seen in God knows how long. Probably when the movie first came out, or shortly thereafter. So might have to check that one out. So anyway, let's get back to our discussion here. So again, if anyone wants to join in, we're probably in our last half hour or so of this. But if anyone wants to join in, you're welcome to. And all you have to do is click there. You'll come in, and we are talking about converting from game system to game system, and converting from world setting to game system, or game system to world setting. My argument started off with, game system to game system. Any of these things can be done. It's just how much conversion becomes too much, to where you might lose, the original game system, and we go back to, that same old argument of going on, like, Gary Gygax's line of, sure, you can make changes to a game system, but at some point you're no longer playing that game anymore. And so that's one of my arguments as well, is that if you have to convert something so much, and there's already a game system tied to that, or paired up with that world setting, then just use that game system. And I've gotten into this argument with people over the time. It was like, hey, let's take 5e and we're going to run Star Trek with 5e. I was like, all right, well, you have FASFA, and you have you have Modiphius's Star Trek, even though it's not a great one, to do that already. And, why run Fallout with another game system if Modiphius already has a Fallout game system? Or, the only argument you can make for, or one of the main arguments I think you can make for a world setting, and having different game systems that did fairly good job with them, is the Middle Earth. Middle Earth has had, has the ICE, which might have been the first one. So Iron Crown Entertainment might have been the first to utilize Middle Earth as a setting for their Lord of the Rings game. But then you had, Free League do the One Ring, and that's considered to be a very, very good game system for what you're looking for there. People can argue against that as well. Keep it super simple or KISS. Yes, keeping it super simple or KISS. I don't remember super being one of the KISS words. Yes, it's not. It's keep it simple, stupid is what KISS stands for. All right, but moving on, and yes, we do have Bo. Hey, Bo, how's it going?
Hey, thanks for having me on. I'm kind of glad I could inspire some of this discussion. And I think we talked about this before, and I think to your point regarding Star Trek, that's actually pretty good, but it goes both ways too. And my counter to that was, if you're playing Star Wars, which Star Wars do you play? West End Game Star Wars, Fantasy Flight Star Wars, D20 Star Wars, which ones? I mean, and I think that some of what we get to is this intangible feel. Games have a feel,
Yes.
and only D&D feels like D&D. And if I'm playing Fantasy Trip or Dungeon Fantasy or RuneQuest Fantasy, does it still feel? Well, it doesn't feel like. Does it feel like D&D? No, but does it still feel like fantasy?
Yeah, I don't think I'm going there. I'm talking about like the theme setting,
Sure.
So to me, and again, this might just be me, I only run AD&D First Edition in Greyhawk. To
Right.
me, the feel of the world setting and the game system just pair up, naturally pair up. All right.
And is that because of your experience?
It could be. It could just be my, just my own bias towards it, my own, because I like other game systems. Like I've tried running Castles and Crusades in Greyhawk. All right, I've run Shadow Dark in Greyhawk, and yet I still don't feel the same connection as when I'm running AD&D in Greyhawk. All right, and I've run Shadow Dark in the Hyborian Age, in Conan Cimmerian, and yet even though I had to convert the game system to kind of match what I was looking for, it doesn't compare to running Conan 2D20 in the Hyborian Age because they're built to work with each other. I was a big fan of TSR's Conan, set in the Hyborian Age. All right, but AD&D First Edition Conan, those two modules didn't work as well. Maybe because they were just too tied to the movie, and little less on the world setting. But that's where I'm kind of coming on. So it's like it's a combination of the feel of the game system matching the theme and feel of the game world. I think sometimes they are they're so connected that it's hard to separate them, at least in my mind. Now there are some examples like you mentioned just now, like Star Wars. I'm sure that there are plenty of game systems out there that can match that theme and match that feel that you get from Star Wars. But Star Wars is a much more universal storyline, right? It's like the theme of it is so generic, good versus evil, and you have kind of like the mix of tech and mysticism, that you have that in different game systems that will work fine there. But Star Trek, on the other hand, the open worldness of Star Trek's universe was not captured by Modiphius at all. You know what I'm saying? And it's like there it just failed, at least in my opinion. It totally failed to capture that setting, that universal setting of Star Trek.
I was also wondering if sometimes if a game has, like you said, a unique mechanic or a novelty mechanic that you come to associate. And there are games that I haven't played but heard about that were just garbage. And my favorite example of that is the first Firefly RPG. Mm-hmm. If the game is unplayable, why would I want to play the universe of Firefly in a Firefly game when I can play the universe of Firefly in like Mongoose Traveler?
Right.
And then that was, and I don't think we're entirely across purposes here. I think this is all related, and I think that factor that combines these things is, again, feel. What does a game feel like? And I don't know if you're trying to capture a mechanic or an element of lore or something unique. You mentioned running. You only run Forgotten Realms with D&D, or you only run Greyhawk with D&D, or whatever universe, whatever Mystara, whatever campaign. Right. And what it is, what ties those things specifically together, what makes it not run in another system as well. And I think that some of it might be nostalgia. or
Mhm.
previous experience. This is the way we always done it because this is the way we've always done it, or we always do it.
Right.
And I come from a perspective where I'm a pretty serious gamer now, but I
Mhm.
took like 20 years off in the middle. I mean, I stopped playing role playing games in AD&D Second Edition,
Mhm.
and then I came back pretty hardcore about 2 years ago.
Right.
So I missed a lot of the drama associated with that, but I also think that I don't have as many preconceived notions or biases. I just want to play a game that runs with a fairly smooth mechanic and that allows for an immersive experience. So I'm sure that my experiences also color my judgment. But I think the original point was you'd said, and my question was, why not? Why not run, why not run Aliens? What makes the Aliens RPG so good that I couldn't run that game with Fate or Savage Worlds or something like that?
Yeah. It really does come down to the rules mechanics in that case, right? Because if you're running Aliens RPG or if you're running in the Aliens universe, all right, with whatever game system you're looking to run in the Aliens universe, you have to be able to capture that sense of suspense, horror, um, fatality that you have to capture all of those things in there. So the Aliens RPG or very similar like Mothership is they capture that. If you try to run the Aliens universe using using 5e, for example,
Right.
you're not going to get any of that. You'd have
Because
to
it's a game
change.
it's not fatal. Right.
Right. The game system would have to change so much that you would just be better off using the system that world setting was built for, or take one that is much more malleable to it. Like I see like Savage Worlds or GURPS, well, those are universal game systems. They're
Right.
meant to be ported over into other, other settings, let's say, or other themes. All right, because they're built around that. Those are also skill-based systems rather than class level-based systems as well. Which was one of the arguments I was making with Shadow Dark put into Greyhawk or running actually an AD&D adventure in Shadow Dark using Shadow Dark's rules. And I said that you're going to run into the issue that Shadow Dark only goes up to level 10, and your AD&D adventure is written for, let's say you're doing Tomb of Horrors, which is what, like 12 to 14 or something like that. How are you going to adjust that? Then on top of that, I said the other problem with Shadow Dark versus, an AD&D adventure is that, especially Gygaxian AD&D adventure, is that he was the Monty Hall of, you get a magic item, magic items galore, and Shadow Dark isn't built on that.
Right.
And then finally, the biggest difference or challenge would be that Shadow Dark uses a different experience leveling up system than AD&D does. So you have experience in Shadow Dark is not built off of loot, and it's not necessarily built off of combat either. It's built off of hitting various experiences during the game session, and the experience points are anywhere from like 3 to 5 on average, and then you go exponentially higher with I don't know how familiar you are with the system, but to go from 1 to 2 you need 10 experience points. To go from 2
Right.
to 3 you need 20, and so on and so forth up to level 10, right? So if your adventure is giving on average of 3 to 5, it's going to take you between 2 and 3 sessions, to go from first to second, and then 4 to 6 and so on and so forth. It's going to take you longer and longer to get up there. And along that whole stretch, you might only get, a few magic items along the way, as compared to if you go up to level 10 in AD&D, you're going to have magic items galore,
Sure.
especially running official adventure modules.
Right,
So,
and especially newer editions, right?
Longer to do it too.
Well, the newer editions don't count on you dying at first level or second level the way older editions do.
Yeah.
Doesn't have the fatality.
Yeah, there's a lot of nuance in both things, right? Converting from game system to game system, converting world to game system, or even world setting to world setting, because I know, with this whole idea of like multiverses, it's like, how do you make that shit compatible? Because to me, it's like it doesn't work. It's
right.
Like, then you start mixing themes, and we were joking when we were talking about Eldritch Horror and Toon. How do you get Call of Cthulhu and Toon? What would it look like? And that's where we were doing the acid wash and
Right.
from Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and that's how you could, I guess, achieve that. Anything is possible. I'm not saying that these compilations are not they're not possible. I'm saying that you can do it, but is the effort worth that?
Well, you have to manage expectations
Mm-hmm.
for players, because if you're running a game, a grittier, more realistic game, would expect the players to avoid dangerous situations.
Mm-hmm.
My joke, I mean, I bring it up all the time. My joke with my players is, don't try to fight the whole Bolivian army, Sundance.
Right.
Because when you're playing in a D&D game, especially, you can count on your cleric, you can count on your potions, you can count on getting just obscene amounts of hit points back from resting. We're in a grittier game, a more even regardless of system, you could even do it with older editions of D&D, where if there are fewer expectations to heal, the other joke is bring your own healing. If you don't have that healing inbuilt into the system and you treat it the way you do, whether those are rules from falling, rules from traps, rules from combat, and a player accumulates his damage and they can't recover from it, well, I hope you brought an extra character sheet. Some games are much more, like you said, much more fatal and have higher expectations in terms of player common sense.
Mm-hmm.
When I run my games, I never ever ask the players, "Are you sure you want to do that?"
No.
As soon as a player says they want to do something, I'm like, "Well, hell yeah, let's get out the dice and math it out." Right? You want to pull a diehard McLean and jump off a building through a plate glass window below, tied by a fire hose? Heck yeah, but you might end up as a greasy spot down on Main Street.
Right.
And it's going to happen. Whereas in D&D was always the best example, because if you got as a martial class to a certain level, you could actually survive terminal velocity.
Right.
So, when you convert from system to system or setting to setting, you have to take into account physics and the physics of your game world. What are your expectations for your players? I expect my players to think, measure twice, cut once. If you're thinking out loud, you say, well, what if I do this? That's fine. But as soon as they say, yeah, I'm going to do it. Yes, absolutely. Either it's a glorious experience or it's a glorious death. Either way, we're putting to the dice roll. And you have to manage those expectations with your players. What do your players expect? Yeah. Your players expect the kind of game like, are you playing a Conan like the books, or a Conan like the comic books, or a Conan like the movies? And I think that makes a big difference. And then I think those are some of the things, Richard, that you mentioned yourself. We just maybe haven't, pointed the finger at that difference between feel and mechanics
Yeah.
and the reality of the dice, and how, like, the other good example, like you said, is D20. D20, the way the game is set up, you get to a certain level, you could take a 44 Magnum shot, because you just can't do enough dice damage
Yeah.
to kill off a 5e
Character, right?
based
Yeah.
character.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's why I think a lot of, I really like the point that you're making with, between like, player expectation and physics between different worlds, and it reminded me of like a quasi joke I used to play on my students, right? I used to ask my students this question: who would win in a fight? The Incredible Hulk versus Bugs Bunny. All right. And they would be like,
Right.
the Incredible Hulk is undoubtedly the Incredible Hulk. Nope. Bugs Bunny would win every time. All right. And it's because of world physics.
Right.
The Incredible Hulk has to live according to our world physics. Bugs Bunny is a cartoon character. He can take out a pen or pencil and erase Hulk Hogan's the Hulk's limbs. And now the Hulk is just a stump sitting there.
Right.
All right. Erase his entire body. All right. He does not have to function according to, he can breathe in space. All right. There've been plenty of cartoons where he does that, or breathe underwater, he is not bound by real world physics, but the Hulk is, no matter how powerful he becomes. So
Right.
it's that expectation when the players expect, the players expect that a game theme is not going to match the world physics. That's a problem, right? When they're, and that's where they'll exceed the expectations, right? Of saying, well, I should be able to take this, a 44 Magnum shot to the face and still walk away from it. You know what I'm saying? It's like, that's where they kind of fail. That's where it falls apart. And either the player's expectation is going to be a disappointment to them because you held them, to the physics of it, or the game that you're running is going to suffer because you're going to meet that player's unrealistic expectations and just modify the outcome, and so that's why I think it's important to have them mesh, for them to make sense. What your gaming experience should make sense, unless you're playing a cartoon, and that's fine. It doesn't have to make sense, but otherwise it should make sense.
So there should be an internal expectations and external expectations then, right?
Yes. Yeah. And them being, always falling on the side of, make it make sense kind of thing, like the meme says, just make this make sense. And that's, pairing that expectation with theme and with, I love the fact that you brought up physics, the physics of the world setting as well. And the tone is another really important thing, because if you lose the tone, all right, then all the other things are just not going to feel like they're meshing right. Imagine playing Alien RPG and there's no tone of suspense in it. You're not playing. You might be running the mechanics, but you're not playing the game. The way that it was intended to be. You're not generating the emotion, that game system is meant to create.
And some of that then is incumbent upon the game master, the table runner, the keeper, or whatever you call that person, to set that tone effectively. And I wonder then, do mechanics, the mechanics related to feel of the game, does that become a crutch for a lot of players and game masters? So instead of trying to set that feel tone, they rely upon a game mechanic to do it for them?
I guess it can. Like, I don't I'll give you an example. That
Please.
I never use morale. All right, in a game system, even if the game system has the most complex morale system, to me, the player establishes their character's own morale.
Right.
They'll either know when to fight and when to flight,
Sure.
and if they get it wrong, their character's most likely going to die.
Right.
So I never hold the player, to, oh, you have to make a roll to see if you test morale. No.
Do you
You
use
know,
morale for NPCs or monsters?
No, I just use it just off the sense of, I think about the creature. If it's non-intelligent, it fights to the death. If it's even low intelligence, all right, at some point it's going to say, hey, I'm down to, one hit point. I'm going to try to run now because, I'm not here to die, for not unless their fear of failure is, so, so much more than just dying on the spot, then
Right.
I might, but it's all in my own kind of looking at the situation and making that decision as the game master, whether or not an NPC is going to turn and run away.
Right. Right. Because I only use whatever you call it, a fright check, a fear check, a morale check. I only use them for NPCs, and typically in instances where as the table runner, as the game master, when I just don't know, especially in terms of like beasts, sometimes monsters become startled. Maybe a loud noise could startle a lion while it's in a fight with a gazelle. Even something over
Yeah.
here can trigger its fight or flight response, and that's the only time I typically use those checks. And it became a significant plot point in my game last week when I had the players, or actually two of the PCs were swallowed by a giant antlion den, and the sand was crushing the PCs in their power armor. The antlion couldn't hurt them, but the tons of sand on top were hurting them. And the PCs above were able to use an explosive to frighten the antlion away. And that's the reason I ask. If it would have been an intelligent monster or NPC, things might have gone 100% differently. And I think that that actually relates to the discussion, because when some games have more deliberate rules for fright checks, fear checks, morale checks, and some are more vague or leave it entirely up to the DM's discretion. And then you have to ask yourself, well, how far along are you going to let the PCs get in a situation that might kill them before you give them away, give them an out. So that's really interesting that you mentioned that.
Yeah, it's a, like, on that specific example, like when do you try to prevent a total party wipe, let's say? I mean, the only time that I've only experienced a total party wipe as a player once, just Tomb of Horrors. So I'm almost certain that's the only time. I mean, large group, like 5 players, 5-player characters, I've lost solo player characters or whatnot in other instances, but only one total party wipe. Now, when you're a convention play, all right, you're going to run a convention game very, very differently. And I know Peter will jump in on this as well, and probably Roger as well, and probably everyone else. You're certainly willing to jump in. I'm talking about people that I know actually run convention games.
Right.
And so if I would try to avoid a total party wipe in a convention game more so than at a home game. And the reason being is that you essentially have paying customers at your table,
Right.
and I've had near total party wipes in my one of my Shadow Dark things where, 4-player characters died on a freaking bridge, an ice bridge. They fell off this bridge, and it was like it was the second to last encounter. And I was like, well, shit. It's like, I mean, we're rolling everything in front. And I was like, there it was like the integrity of the dice rolls and all of the second and third chances that they had. And they were just rolling crap. The one player basically sacrificed his own character. So I don't even count that. So of the 7 characters, 3 of them died on this bridge, falling off of this bridge. Multiple re-rolls and everything like that, and just rolling like shit. And at that point, I was like, we're in the last 15 minutes of the game session. And, it was designed to be, it's a set in a Hyborian age. It was designed to be a pretty brutal, contest. And I just let the dice rolls stand. It was like, all right, that's where it's going to leave at. And, and then the rest of the party, when they went into the last situation and they were about to face the big bad monster, I was like, I tried to describe the creature as something so immense and just oozing with power and that I was trying to give them every hint, to be like, we can't beat this damn thing. I mean, we started with a party of 7 for a reason, you know what I'm saying? And so they decided, hey, we're going to grab the MacGuffin that we were there for, and we're going to try to just beat feet out of here, and because there was no way if they challenged this thing that they were going to survive. Just not with that number of player characters they still had left.
Well, not with that attitude, you want.
Yeah, I tried to prevent a total party wipe because it was a convention play. I thought that would be the worst possible way to end the adventure, is to have them all get wiped out. As it turned out, the one player rolled a natural 20 to grab the MacGuffin on the way out of the place. And they were the first group of 7 times that I ran this adventure that ever accomplished that. So even though, 4/7 of the party died, they were the first group, and I made sure they knew it. You're the first group that actually succeeded in the adventure. All right. Others had killed the monster and still didn't get the MacGuffin. Others had, had ended up having to run out because they lost too much. Others had not even gotten that far because they lost so many that they just decided to turn back and return home. This is too challenging or whatever. So I've had a variety of different endings to it, but that was the only one that was ever successful in it. And hopefully they walked away from it. I know most of the players that, that even died in the encounter, their characters died in the encounter. They were like, hey, that was a lot of fun. And it really did capture that Robert E. Howard kind of feel to an ending of those stories where you almost never get the MacGuffin. Conan almost never got, anything from his adventures other than the girl draped across his shoulder, kind of thing. That's how they almost always ended. So it really did capture that feel. And so getting back to your point, I let them in a home game, I let them do their, decide to do what they're going to do. And there'll be, negative consequences for doing that, trying to do that or whatever. And if their character dies, their character dies, it's part of the learning experience. And hopefully they don't make those same kind of mistakes again. So, I don't want to ramble too much on that point. I hope I kind of made it or at least touched on what you were trying to say.
No, in fact, I'd have 100 questions about that. As the convention, the person who runs games at specific conventions, I wonder if the player's attitude is that, it's a convention game. This is a one shot. Let's be a little bit more bold. Let's be a little bit more, theatrical in our actions. Let's do things that, let's push our luck. in ways that we would never ever do in a recurring campaign. And I wonder if that was your experience, because that's kind of what it feels like to me.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. Like as a player at conventions, I always assume my character is going to die. All right. It just, and the only time that was subverted was when I survived Frank Metzner's game, which killed 11 of 16 player characters. And I actually survived it. And I was like, holy cow, I actually survived Frank's game. All right. But Alan Hammock's game, Ghost Tower of Inverness, died. The first time that I ever played, Weird Frontiers, DCC Weird Frontiers, character died. When I played, there's been a bunch of games. When I played in Zeb Cook's Oriental Adventures game, character died. And I knew that character was going to die as soon as I made that decision. But I thought, it was like he was presented with the, come warm yourself by the fire kind of, scenario. And I was like,
right,
sure, I'll go in, because I was thinking it's not going to really be exactly like it happened in the movie, but it certainly was. It was like, I ended up dying there. And, so players like Peter's also saying it's not just running it differently. Players play their characters much differently at conventions because of that one-shot perspective, like you mentioned as well. Character preservation instinct for some players is removed in there. Yes, because you want to have a fun, entertaining time. When I played Weird Frontiers for the first time, it was awesome how my character died. I was on one of those. It was set in a weird Western thing, and I was like an undead, character anyway. And I was on one of those carts that you pump, on a thing, loaded with dynamite, going towards another cart.
Oh, right.
Yeah, one of those hand carts,
right.
on the railroad tracks, and it was loaded up with dynamite. And the other guy was coming with the boss was coming from the other direction, and so we were coming at, and I was supposed to ignite, the fuse, and then jump off just in the nick of time. And of course, I didn't calculate, the rolls coming in, because we're both making strength checks to see how fast we were approaching. And then I miscalculated how quickly before we were going to hit. And so when I set off the explosion, I was still not able to jump off in time for it. And my character was killed, but I reduced that boss down to just a handful of hit points left, and the rest of the party were able to destroy it. So I was like, it was the coolest way to go, and it was probably only about an hour into the game session when that took place. And then I had two more characters, pre-generated characters, and the second one was killed, fighting in a huge gunfight and everything. So that was killed, and then finally my third character, which was like in the last 30 minutes or so of the game session, he actually survived, but I don't think that we liberated the town or saved the town. I think the town was eventually overrun anyway. This is going back quite a few years.
Right.
And so I don't remember exactly how it ended, whether we secured the town or not. But it was just just an experience, just having fun, and it was fun to lose characters as long as they were like a momentous occasion like that, kind of thing, really cool stuff. So no matter no matter the power of foes, nothing beats the clock at a convention. Yeah. And that's the other thing too, when you're running games at conventions, that you have to remember is that no matter what your pacing is or your plans were for how the adventure was supposed to run out, you have to absolutely have a start, a middle, and a finish. It has to finish. You can't just say, all right, we're out of time now, and we're going to go. That is the worst possible way to end a convention game, is to just have it stop
Right.
because of that time constraint. You have to be able to, change what's going on and move things along. And sometimes that might include, are you sure you want to do that kind of a thing? Even though I don't think I've ever done that. I might have, in the moment or whatever, but there's times when I've removed whole encounters, just to
Sure.
make sure we're going to get there to the end, so, and there's a good example of altering game mechanics or changing the world theme or whatever to fit within that time constraint, and that's another thing that wasn't even thinking about, coming into this, discussion here, is that's yet another component, of are all of these things are mixing and matching game systems with game worlds, a great place to be in a convention setting. Like, is that where you're going to mess around with a little bit? And and that's just another really interesting, thing that, I'm not prepared to talk on that yet. That's another whole discussion, I think.
The way I see that is like, if I'm a chef, uh, cooking for new people is not the time to experiment. You experiment around your friends and family, and you bring your A game for strangers. But
Yeah.
that's just, as far as running a game. If I were running a game at a convention, even if I just signed up for on a table, and I wasn't being paid or anything, I was just there, I still don't think I would want to disappoint the players who are paying to be there, whether they're paying me or not. I'd want to make sure they had an immersive, entertaining experience, at least to the extent that I'm able to provide it.
Yeah. Yeah, like Roger's saying here too, is some convention GMs that I play with now will let you keep your XP and items found and use that character at another game of theirs in the future. This makes it a little bit more careful with your choices. Yeah, and you have to let them know that beforehand. I would still, I let them take their character sheet, and then they can do whatever they want with that character afterwards. And rather than doing that, Roger, I would probably tell them, if you want to use this character again in a future game of mine, I'll let you, we'll come up with some way that your character actually has returned. Well, maybe not from the dead, but, your character will return in some way, where it was kind of iffy whether or not they were killed. Were you really killed in the blast, or did you fall in into a stack of pillows off the side of the cliff instead, that kind of thing,
Well, that was also, I think he was talking about, it's as an incentive to keep your character alive.
Yeah.
And if that's your incentive, then
like I don't want them to be stupid bold. You know what I'm saying? It's like, I want them to be able to, make that decision, like not to cast a fireball in a 10 by 10 room. Which,
classic.
that's how my character in Alan Hammock's game died, actually, along with three of us. One of the player characters was like, I'm going to cast a fireball on this, on the glass globe or whatever it was at the end of this thing. And it was like, we're all right around this thing. Why are you, we're not under attack by anything. Why are you casting it? And he was just doing it, I think, just to be, a jerk, but Alan Hammock, right, you're casting fireball, and three of our player characters died, in the process of it. And, the fireball did destroy the orb or whatever it was. But it was like we were hacking that thing, with our swords anyway and damaging it anyway. We would have eventually destroyed it, either way. So so getting back to, Roger's, comment about, just making players, not foolhardy. rather than being more careful. I'd rather them just not be so foolhardy. And I would certainly hold them to the fact that, hey, if you're going to intentionally cause the death of other player characters in my next game, you can't use that character. I question whether or not I let him in the next game, but with something like that. But anyway, and bless you, by the way. So
Thank you.
and no one saw that guy ever again. Yeah, that's exactly
Right.
my point. You would
I
never
thought you would
see.
not be welcome at any table ever again.
Yeah, you're not coming back. I'm going to I'm not going to let you sit at the table again for something like that because that's just bull.
I'll allow any alignment but chaotic stupid.
Yeah, it's like, especially when it's at the end and everything like that. That's just, I mean, that's almost the equivalent of PvP at that point. And a convention game should never include PvP. Not unless it's the game system is designed for that. But a convention game should never include PvP, especially if it's not. If it's not what everybody is willing to do at that point. That's where the GM has to just step in and say, nope, it's not happening. You missed. I rolled a 20. You missed. Miracle.
Your spell components were bad. You flubbed the spell.
Yeah.
Anything at that point.
Yes. I will exert GM fiat over your actions, and if you don't like it, oh no, you thought you actually hit, but you were put under an illusion that made you think that you actually hit, and you missed instead. Right. But you expended the spell. you expended the ability, right?
You lost the spell. You lost the components. Mm-hmm. It fizzled out. It poofed away. Yeah.
So anyway, so I mean, really interesting questions. I really like the questions that came out of these like last 2 days or so of the things. Like your question was the first one, I think, that really prompted it, because I think you asked for like a clarifying question. Like, what do you mean by like world matching game system? And hopefully this kind of gets to that, thing. And I think you're probably like 90%, where my mindset is coming from. And like 90% is nostalgia. Like I'm just used to running AD&D in Greyhawk, and even though I've tried to bring other game systems into it, I just keep on falling back to AD&D and Greyhawk, and I take the other game systems and move them elsewhere, where they're either more appropriate in my mind, or just a generic, my own kind of nebulous world setting, kind of thing. It's like,
right.
Go ahead.
I think you're such a true gamer, though, Richard. You're such a true gamer that you can, compartmentalize these things. And I don't know if other people play as many different systems. And I certainly do know that most gamers own way more games than they will ever get to play in their lifetime, unless they are serious about, playing 2 or 3 different games a year. Mm-hmm. I mean, I've got just out here, I'm only running 1, but I've got 4 more that I'd like to run before I cash in my chips, Mm-hmm. And sometimes people, they get so caught up in either past experiences or they know what they like. These are the people that go to restaurants sort of the exact same thing every time, right? No, I know what I like. I know at this restaurant I like the double cheeseburger. I'm going to get the double cheeseburger. But wait, what about the patty melt? Nope, never had it. Never going to have it. So for people that do want to try new things, and I'm sort of get curious about this because I'm interested in running. I've got a Pendragon game I want to run this year, and I've got I'm working on an alternate history English Civil War game that's got a lot of Solomon Kane elements to it that I'd like to run this year. Cool. And finding people who are willing to try new things is sometimes not easy. And so I think that's the feel you're talking about. I want a game that feels like every game I've ever played from back when I was, 12 years old in, 1988.
Yeah,
or younger.
yeah, yeah, I try to play as many different things as I can. Um, and I try to run a lot of different games. Now, sometimes that's bitten me in the ass. I went to a convention and ran 5 different game systems, and it kicked my ass. I mean, it was just rough to run 5 different game systems and 5 very different game systems as well. So
Right.
it was, it wasn't like I was running, three editions of D&D, 3 different editions of D&D, and then 2 other
Oh,
games. No, it was, dramatically different in theme and genre and game mechanics and whatnot. And it was, it was brutal. I can't say it any other way, but it was really brutal to run. Because on top of that, that was between 15 and 20 hours of gameplay, over 2.5. Yeah, and then I played in 3 other game sessions on top of that,
right.
so it was a lot. It was a lot for a day and a half of gameplay, so that's one downside to being so open to playing so many different systems, is that you can fall into that trap. So for anybody ever looking to run a convention game, absolutely run a convention game, get that experience of running a game, run a game that you're very, very familiar with.
Right.
And if you're going to run more than one session, run, 2 of the same system and 1 of a different if you want to, but don't go beyond 2 different game systems. I think you'll really, really wear yourself out, and so just based on my own experience, never run 5. I'll say that definitively. Never run 5 different game systems.
What a blessing, though. I mean, not to get too far afield, but I mean, people that live, west of the Mississippi, I think that there are so fewer conventions because it's so far between population centers. Where if you live someplace like Denver, and I don't even know where the next closest city is to Denver, or Boise, Idaho. Whereas if you live, I mean, my gosh, back east, you can just drive for an hour and be in a city.
Yeah, but there weren't that many game conventions in this area. Like, I'm in New York. All
Right.
right. So I I'm driving about 3 hours to Massachusetts to go to a convention.
Right. Okay.
Now 2 conventions opened up fairly local to me, within an hour, and one's like 7 minutes away, but that's a tiny convention. But I'm driving from New York to Philadelphia. That's 3.5 hours. From New York to Massachusetts, that's 3.5 hours. From where I'm at in New York to Rogers Convention in Central New York, that's a 3 hour, roughly a 3 hour commute, up to there. So that's kind of my range, is like 3 to 4
3
hours
hours.
driving, but those conventions have all cropped up really since the end of COVID. You know what I'm saying? Prior to that,
Right.
I mean, yeah, I could go all the way out to Long Island, New York, which is about, another 3 hour, 3.5 hour ride. Um, but Philadelphia Area Game Expo wasn't there. I wasn't going to PAX, or even PAX East in Boston's like 3.5 hours from me as well. So there just weren't that many tabletop role playing conventions around. I could go to Javits Center in Manhattan for the Comic Con, which is, an experience you definitely want to have once in your life and never a second time. It's
Right.
like, it's just so overwhelming that, and then that's not an overnight go twice. You'll be killed from one day. It's like you'll just be worn out from one day. It's like, I don't have to go back a second day, kind of thing. Just to be in a complex with 60,000 people at once is just unbelievable. Awesome. You see so many great things going on there, but just having to walk such a large space too. Yeah, I mean this place is huge, and I'm sure that Gen Con is dwarfed. All right, and that's a big convention that's dwarfed by the Javits Center in New York.
Right.
And so yeah, so it's just, and we are running kind of far afield. I will put this up here. So this is my starting. This is why I'm starting CNY RPG Con, and I've been boosting Roger's thing. I'll probably have Roger on in a couple of weeks to keep on boosting it, but I'm really looking forward to that convention. You max out at 6 hours. 6 hours of running or 6 hours driving. I can't drive 6 hours anymore either. I'm getting too old. I just turned 58. I'm getting too old to do that. Having said that, there are groups of 4 of us that's talking about driving out to GaryCon. Yeah, it's a 15-hour ride. I mean, it's so far. I might do it.
That's 2 days.
Yeah.
A day. That's really it's even for a seasoned road tripper. I mean, I don't see driving more than 12 hours at a stretch, and that's if you're with. When I go to see my mom's. I said I can drive by myself 12 hours. Me and my wife 14 hours. Me and the kids 2 days.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a, again, like, I used to be able to drive from, New York to Florida, when I was in my early 20s, like I'd drive at 11 o'clock at night, jump in the car, put together a go bag really quick and start rolling out by, 1 o'clock in the morning, and then just driving straight through 16 hours, bang, there. You know what I'm saying? It's like, not a challenge when I was 23. At 58, it's not happening, just not happening.
Yeah.
So anyway, all right. So I am going to thank everyone, especially Bo, for popping in. And
thank you for addressing my questions. I hope we have more questions.
So really, really cool question. And the other question as well of making adventure modules compatible to other game systems. Again, you can do any of these things. Any of these things is possible. Getting back to what Peter said earlier on was that you'd have to look at how much time is actually required to do those conversions, whether or not it's useful or not. I want to go back to Michael's question right here. Going back to the original topic, I think players not wanting to try new games may be a reason GMs try to kludge. Put together. All right. Yeah, I was getting the gist of it. I've just never seen that word before. Kludge the favored game rather than switching to an appropriate system. Yes, there is a real, although that should be coming less so, is like players that are, I only play one system. I'm sorry, if you're only playing one system and that's the only game system that you're ever going to play, take care, have a good one. Thanks a lot. So if you're only running one game system, I think you're severely limiting your experience in the hobby. Whether you're only playing one game system or you're only running one game system, you are really shortchanging yourself in what you could be experiencing in the tabletop role-playing hobby. And so I strongly suggest you get away from doing that and you try to expand your horizons in doing so. So I'm actually going to run off to dinner myself. So everyone, thank you so much for coming in and participating in the chat. To Mercurius, thank you so much for donating your money towards giving someone a membership. So as always, thank you so much for doing so. And for everyone else, I look forward to seeing you on a gaming screen or at a convention sometime soon. My next convention is going to be AutoCon 4, followed the following week by Central New York RPG Con, Rogers Convention. I will be bringing both of those coordinators into the channel before that comes up. And so give them both an opportunity. And hopefully I can get everybody over to ShireCon in September as well. So we will be boosting all of these New York and near New York, Connecticut conventions coming up in the next couple of months. So you'll have a great one. Thanks, everyone. And as always, keep those dice rolling. And I'm going to close off on this screen. If you haven't done so, I'm going to be testing out these two QR codes here and to see if they're working. So if you haven't subscribed to the channel, scan the one that says YouTube. And if you haven't joined me on Twitter or X, you can also scan that one as well. So I'm going to be testing these out here. And I'll leave this up for a couple of seconds. And then I'll be logging off. So here we go. And I should put like a 30-second countdown on this as well. So you all have a great one. Take care.